Are we ready? Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Midcoast Community Council meeting of June 25, 2014. Will the council members introduce themselves?
Dave Wilson.
Dan Haggerty.
Chris Johnson.
Joel Janelle.
Laura Stein.
Lisa Ketchum. And we have Nicholas Calderon, Supervisor Horsley's legislative aide. And let's start off with this Board of Supervisors report.
So we have just one announcement for tonight. On July 1st, the Board of Supervisors meeting, Supervisor Horsley will be introducing a resolution for the Board of Supervisors to vote on opposing GGNRA's preferred alternative F for their dog management plan and asking that GGNRA adopt a more inclusive, communally acceptable management policy. So San Francisco and Marin counties have adopted one already, and so San Mateo is going to be voting on that. And once again, that'll be next Tuesday, July 1st, at the Board of Supervisors meeting. That's been an issue that has been on kind of everyone's mind out here for a while. So hopefully this will provide some support for the effort to allow dogs to continue to access lands out here, specifically rancho. So that is the only report, although I believe there's some questions that people have.
Does anyone have questions for Nicholas?
I do.
I do.
Chris?
Oh, Laura?
Feel free.
Okay. Thank you. So Nicholas, thank you. This is in response to an article I saw in the Half Moon Bay Review. I just wanted to follow up and maybe you could, if you don't have the answers, email me or bring them to the next meeting. The first one is about Seton Medical Center Coastside, and we had heard a few months ago that it was going to be sold by the Daughters of Charity, and it wasn't quite clear what the future held for medical services on the coast side. So the question I have, I guess, for the Board of Supervisors is, what is the county's involvement in this sale and the future of that site? Because in the article, something that gave me pause for thought was that Deputy County Manager Raina Farral said that the buyer would likely be a private hospital owner, but that it could wind up being a real estate transaction, which I don't really understand that sentence. They seem, two parts don't seem to go together, but the real estate transaction versus a private hospital owner seems to imply that it could be sold to somebody and the structure goes away and something completely different that's not medical related goes there. So I'm wondering, what's the county's involvement in this process? Is there a county department or a person that is liaising with the Daughters of Charity that I could contact to get more information to then kind of bring that information to the MCC? And we heard from Officer Gattuso last month, and there was a big discussion about the emergency corps that they're developing out here, but I feel that there's a major problem if we have no medical services out here, no hospital, where you talk about how isolated the coast side is. If something happens and we have no hospital, emergency room, anything to go to, I see that as a major hole in any kind of emergency preparedness plan. Not to mention it really is not advantageous for residents on the coast side. So that's information I'm looking for about Seton Medical Center. In that same article, it mentioned that the Board of Supervisors had approved $100,000 in the budget for Devil's Slide Trail connectors, and I was wondering exactly what is that $100,000 for? I think we know which two trail connectors we're talking about, but what's the status of that? What's that money going to, and where are we on getting those trails connected? And the last thing was, this article also mentioned that $250,000 was set up for Moss Beach Park improvements, and I'm just wondering of what those specific improvements, probably the bathrooms, but ADA and some other things. But if you could provide information on that when you can, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you, Nicholas.
And actually, the person who you want to talk to on all of that is right here in front of you. Supervisor, you could not have timed that any better. Let me give you your seat here. You could not have timed that any better.
Good evening.
I'll let you
Right.
We're still on the
Countertop.
Board of Supervisors report, and Chris had 3 questions, one about the future of the hospital, and the money being spent on Moss Beach Park, and the money allocated for trail connectors from Double Slide. If you have any news, or if you could.
Well, the hospital, we did vote to essentially fund them to about $1.2 million a year until such, or a month, that is, until December. So that's roughly about $7.2 or $7.6 million that we're going to give them until December. They believe that they will be sold by December. And we would continue underwriting them to some extent, or maybe at a similar amount, depending on what kind of services that they offer. So if they continue, so like, for example, now with district elections, my concern is mostly with Seton Coastside. So when we voted to give them the some million, one of our priorities was to make sure that Seton Coastside stayed open and provide the same level of service. And when it is sold, we'll have to see who the new owner is. And again, my priority is really not necessarily an emergency room, although some people would say the emergency room is great. I think the emergency room, in a way, is it can be misleading, because there's really very little that that emergency room can really, in fact, handle. Although I've heard some people say that it's very critical. I would think an urgent care is probably really would serve the coastside better. If you had some kind of a major issue, I think you'd want to be in air flight out of here, or ambulance over to Kaiser or Sequoia or Mills Peninsula. They really are set up. They don't really have the equipment. Like you don't have a cath, what's called a cath lab. Inserting a stent. You call them a stent. You can't do that here. So if you had a stroke, same thing. You'd be better at a full service hospital. So I think an urgent care facility would serve the coastside well. On the other hand, we also there's about 116 beds for long-term care. Most of those people stay for many years until they pass on. I want to see that continue as well, because we have a really crying need for long-term care. So that's kind of where we're at. There is a rally coming up on Saturday that employees are staging, because they've heard that one of the companies that is interested is called Prime, and they are a for-profit hospital. And I don't know that they're the leading candidate. We understand that there's about 6 candidates who want to buy the whole system. And it's been some have proposed to us that we would buy Seton. We're not interested. We lose money on a general hospital. We actually have a med-surgical unit at our San Mateo hospital that can actually handle the overflow if we had to. We could handle that. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of it. The other question had to do with,
I'm sorry. Is there a county liaison, a person that I could contact to stay more on top of it? Because, as I mentioned to Nicholas, Officer Gattuso was here last meeting talking about emergency preparedness on the coast, and if we have an emergency, an air flight or an ambulance flight over the hill may not be possible. So making sure that we have something here. In the article I referenced said that it might be a private hospital owner, but could end up being a real estate transaction. So that leaves open.
It's not going to, no, it's not likely to be a real estate transaction. What happens is that if you want to close a hospital, even Seton Coastside, you have to get approval. There's a whole, if people think the Coastal Commission is difficult, you haven't seen nothing until you've seen the Attorney General's office and another organization called OSHPD. It's very difficult to close any kind of a medical facility. It's a very tough process. So that's not likely to happen. I actually should show you this. I'll give you something that's done by FEMA, and it has to do with the potential for disaster. And essentially, it has a whole bunch of little red dots where roads will collapse, and you will find very few red dots on the coast side. Most of them are on the 101 corridor. So your chances of being cut off are pretty minimal. I know people think that that's gonna happen. I'm here to tell you that's not. You don't have any overpasses, you don't have any big tall buildings, for the most part, maybe a building like this. These kind of buildings structurally do quite well in earthquakes. No, I mean, no guarantee that you're not gonna have some significant damage, but you don't have, 7, 8-story buildings. You don't have masonry reinforced buildings. You don't have overpasses over freeways. You don't have viaducts. The likelihood of being cut off on the coast are very minimal. That's not to say that, I can tell you in a major earthquake, say an 8.0 earthquake, there will be casualties. And it's estimated by ABAG and through FEMA, not to scare anybody, but it's estimated to be about 12,000 casualties. Again, they're not on the coast side. And the reason for that, again, is that it's overpasses, it's bridges, it's railroads, it's major freeways. You don't really have that here. So you're actually in probably the area that would have the least damage. That's not to say that, houses wouldn't have problems, that you might be coming off of foundations, you could have some casualties, but most of the damage and the serious problems are really gonna be on the Bay 101 side. And the earthquakes that, it's estimated that in the next 30 years, we will suffer, or it's actually a percentage, I should say. I shouldn't say we will. I should say that there's an estimate that there's something like a 70% chance that there'll be a major earthquake in the next 30 years. And it most likely is not the San Andreas, but the Hayward Fault. But, the state of California and the whole Bay Area, we're crisscrossed with faults, and every once in a while they come up with a new one. You have a few out here. You have some that go out into the ocean. The people sometimes worry about tsunamis. It's most likely to have a tsunami. You have to have a certain kind of earthquake. In other words, the ground has to go like so, not like that. And the faults around here tend to go like that. The plates tend to move like so. There is something called a Cascadia subduction zone, but that's up in Canada, in the northern part of the state of California. It might have some problems in Eureka, and it might have problems up in Canada, but it does not extend into most of the state of California.
The other one was 100,000 for Devil Slide Trail connectors.
Yeah, you were talking about like the Green Valley Trail, for example?
Well, the article was very vague. It just said 100,000 been budgeted for Devil Slide Trail connectors. I was wondering, for planning, for building, do we have the land? Are these things happening right now, or is this still planning?
Well, the Green Valley Trail has some. Actually, I had members of the MCC on the Devil Slide Task Force when we were planning it, and they're not in the audience tonight.
I was on it.
Oh, you were on, okay. But mostly, I don't know if you were on when we kept on asking the state of California representatives, do you in fact have an easement, permanent easement for a trail? And they kept saying, yes, no problem, no problem. And unfortunately, our staff accepted it and said, yeah, it's all taken care of, the easement's taken care of. Easement's not taken care of. Turns out that the owner's a guy named Beckelsheim, and they had to get the easement through eminent domain, and the easement was really for construction, and there's one is a long-term easement, but it's not an easement for hundreds of people to walk through it every day, and it's not a defined trail. It really is an easement for construction. So we don't believe that really meets the needs of having a trail. And the other thing about it, part of the easement actually expires in 2016. So we're going to try to get the easement extended in perpetuity so that we could build a trail and maintain it. And if we cannot form an agreement fairly quickly, the state had to get eminent domain. We're prepared to do eminent domain there as well. That will allow us then to have the Green Valley Trail. And the Green Valley Trail, actually, one of the nice things about it is it goes to, as you all know, it goes to Gray Whale Cove. And that, we think, is the way really, you know, to get people from, stop them from walking on the road, but that really is the way to get over, unless you have some, you know, real difficulties. That, you know, if you're handicapped, hopefully the handicap spaces at the two parking lots would accommodate that. So that's one easement. The other easement we offer, the city, it's in the city of Pacifica, and it's called, well, it's the Pedro Point Headlands. And actually, the property, we may end up actually taking some of the property into our park system, but that's a trail that would take people from Pacifica, where you have parking areas, and you also have a shuttle. But a person bought that property. It was about a 14-acre site. We don't want the 14 acres. And I offered the city council of Pacifica, I said, we're willing to do eminent domain. What happened was that I was able to secure about $360,000, which we thought was the purchase for an easement. Apparently he wants to, I'm not really clear what it is, if he wants to sell the land or what, but all I'm asking for is, I don't care about the land. I don't want the 14 acres. All I want is an easement. We evaluated the property at most being worth about $450,000. We cannot give him $1 million. That's a gift of public funds. So I offered the city of Pacifica that we would be willing to do an eminent domain procedure, and they declined the offer, and they believe that they're going to continue negotiating with him, and they think they can work out some kind of an arrangement, and that's fine with us, and we will make that $360,000 available to them so that they could eventually get that easement. So that the other thing that would do is that, again, is that we know the parking is inadequate up there, but that would allow people to park in Pacifica or take a shuttle in Pacifica and then access, you'd be able to access that trail. Other thing is, if you are on a bicycle, and if, you know, the part coming from the south heading north isn't the greatest, but it's really bad going from, on the north end, going south. And there are people walking on that. And you probably see some, I'm sure Dave's nodding his head. I've seen, you know, backpackers walking on the very narrow, beyond the limit line, or I guess it's the fog line, or what do they call it. Once we got that trail, you wouldn't have to do that anymore. You could walk on that trail. You could also, you know, you could make it a multimodal trail, so it could be for bicycles as well as pedestrians. And so those are the status of those two. So, you know, we do have some funding for that. We also put in, there's also funding for, I don't know if Nicholas already talked about this. By the way, Nicholas done a fabulous job with the Surfers Beach, because that's, you know, the erosion has been is significant. He has been, you know, he's done really a great job of, I think, Chris, you've been on some of the phone calls with Caltrans. And so what we did is we got the city of Half Moon Bay to give us $100,000. And we got the board to do $150,000, and then we have a $200,000 grant that well, it's actually not a grant, but it's a amount of money that we received for mitigation from the Costco Busan oil spill. So it's roughly $450,000 to do the environmental, the design, and the planning. And once that's done, the state of California will then build revetment, which is essentially, it's like I think, as I understand, it's kind of like a steel plate with riprap, and there will also be a walkway down to the beach. And we are talking to the Army Corps of Engineers about sand replenishment. And we would like them to have a more robust process of moving sand out of the harbor onto that beach. But, you know, they're the federal government. They're here to help us.
Does that do it for you, Chris? Laura?
If you want to proceed ahead, I can wait.
You had a question?
Yeah, I did. Oh, okay. Nicholas mentioned that at the Board of Supervisors, this next meeting, you'll be bringing up a request for, I don't recall the words, more inclusiveness regarding dogs in the GGNRA.
Yes. Well, actually, we went to, myself and Nicholas went even to San Francisco. We went on a press conference with David Chu, who's the president of their Board of Supervisors, and Scott Wiener and Jackie Spear. And our basic the press conference was about GGNRAs. It's not only about dogs, by the way. It's also, there are more restrictions on other kinds of things. And I'm not really sure, so I don't want to, scare people, but my focus really was on dogs. And my feeling is, I gave it from a public safety point of view, is that I'm not saying dogs are going to take on a mountain lion, but there are two things about public safety, especially for women, is that mountain lions do not like dogs. And the reason for that is they're predators. And dogs, now I'm not saying a little teeny dog, but I'm saying like I have two dogs that are Australian Shepherds, and they do anything to protect my wife, and they give up their own life. And so they actually make people, they actually are a safety thing, I think, from a point of view of walking on areas that you're all by yourself. And the other is it is a public safety issue too, because even, there have been crimes that occur in remote areas where there are no witnesses. And, I can point to, I was in law enforcement for a long time, and I can point to trailside killers. And again, I don't want to scare people, say that happens all the time, but nevertheless, people feel much safer with their dog. And the other is that what we argue is that this has been a use, Fort Funston, Corral de la Tierra, for many, many years for people to be able to walk with their dogs. Now, we just think that shouldn't be curtailed, that there should be some recognition that has been the traditional use, and for the federal government and through GGNRA to come and restrict those uses we think is inappropriate. Now, I understand that you might want to say that dogs have to be unleashed. I understand that, that's fine. And you want to restrict it and say that dogs should not be off leash because of specific issues that people who are dog owners must pick up after their dog. I understand all that, but to restrict them and say that they cannot be there, I think is bad policy, bad public policy. So that's we've invited people to come to the Board of Supervisors, express their opinion, and we're going to pass or at least I'm introducing a resolution asking GGNRA to reconsider and to consider all of the recreational uses that people have enjoyed for decades.
Thank you.
Okay, the second item on our agenda is public comments and announcements. Members of the public may speak up to 3 minutes on any topic not on the agenda. Does any have any takers? Leonard?
Leonard Warren, El Granada. Two things. One, there's a conference Friday. Is that what you call it, a conference?
Yes.
Did you mention that before I got here?
I did not.
On planning for sea level rise in San Mateo County. And it's 8:30 in the morning over in Foster City, which I think is about an inch above sea level. Appropriate place to have it. Invitations were sent out to most elected officials and theoretically to executive staff of agencies that decision-making executive staff, but anybody who wants it and didn't get it, I can forward the invite. They're asking for RSVPs, and Dave Pine's actually already sent out 2 reminders about it. I think he wants to make sure people show up. The other comment I have is for Supervisor Horsley. We actually have 2 critical bridges within 3 miles of where I'm standing. Frenchman's Creek and Medio Creek are bridges. And people tend to overlook a lot of bridges. We have 80,000 bridges or something in California, 70 or 80,000, and most of them people don't think about, but every overpass is considered a bridge, and then you have all these creeks and things where you don't really see that you're on a bridge, but you are. And I forget which double slide closure it was. I think it was the double slide closure 9 years ago. We almost lost 92 at the same time. Caltrans was doing a lot of work there. Very few people knew what Caltrans was doing. They had routed traffic right at the top, right at the entrance to Skylon, was routed in through the turnout. And they were doing a massive construction project on what is the traffic lanes. And what was going on there was they had an edge failure and they built a monster retaining wall. And if that hadn't been caught in time, the road was actually slipping. There were longitudinal cracks in the road. And if Caltrans hadn't caught that in time and been able to repair it, we would have had no way out of here short of going through Santa Cruz. So I think that we need to be careful to not get too confident that there won't be problems here.
Thank you, Leonard. Bill, did you have something? No, Joel said he would prefer not.
I don't have the sheet with me.
Oh, just here.
Do you have it?
Yes.
Man, a few words.
Here you go.
You probably could have done it better. Anyway, I just want to make an announcement that the American Red Cross is putting on a shelters operations workshop. It's a training and simulation exercise to have people get prepared for a major disaster out here and how to set up a workshop and kind of practice what we may need to do if we have a big earthquake. They're having 2 classes. The first is Thursday, July 17th, and the second one is Saturday, July 26th. It's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., so I imagine those of you who are not retired will probably do the Saturday one. I'll leave a space open for you. It's going to be at the Coastside Emergency Operations Center. That's down on Kelly. It's right next to where the sheriff's station is now, so you should know where that is. Anybody who wants to do that, you can send an email to Michelle Ortiz, mortiz@coastsidefire.org. Telephone number for Coastside Fire is 726-5213. And I would highly recommend that anybody who has CERT training, even if you were part of what's known as the catch and release program from before, that you re-up for this and get your name back on the list and get active again. There's been a lot of changes over the past 6 months, and it seems to be getting a lot more activity. Thank you.
What was the woman's name again?
It's Michelle Ortiz. Let me just spell her email for you. It's mortiz@coastsidefire.org. And if you don't mind, I'll just give this to Chris so he'll know.
That's
Do you want
great. There's one out on the table, too.
Okay,
Go
I'll
ahead.
leave this one on the table for anyone who wants it.
Thanks, Bill.
Any other public comment? This is-
First,
Excuse me, this is on items not on the agenda.
Right.
correct? Okay.
yes. First question I have has to do, it's related to the agenda item, but it's something I brought up back in 2011 at my first MCC meeting, which is what's going to be done about the illegal parking along the highway? I mean, we're going to be talking later about these highway safety issues, and yet at Surfers Beach, you can put in as many pedestrian crosswalks as you want. Unless you do something about all the illegal parking there, you're never going to have a safe highway. So that's my first comment. The second is I would like to invite everybody to the 2nd annual Coastside Rainbow Pride event, Saturday, July 12th at Half Moon Bay Brewing Company. Beer garden doors open at 2, and the show is from 4 to 6. There's going to be a drag show like there was last year. Lots of fun, lots of good times, and I have some flyers if people want to pick them up.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Do council members have announcements? I do. Here goes. So Plan Princeton, the existing conditions report is available online at planprinceton.com. The report completes Phase 2 of the multi-year land use planning effort for the greater Princeton area. The next phase is alternatives evaluation. Sound familiar? Presentation at the MCC is expected in early August, and a community meeting tentatively on September 11. Related to that is the Half Moon Bay Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan Update, which is in its final phase. The Land Use Compatibility Plan relates to Plan Princeton in that the land use and zoning regulations for the area around the airport will need to be in compliance with the updated ALUCP. So what's happening now is the environmental document, which is a negative declaration and initial study, is available for public comment from June 23rd to July 23rd. There's a hard copy. Oh, and here's the draft final actual ALUCP document. And this hard copy will be here at GSD for the public to see, and there's also a copy at the Half Moon Bay Library, and it's also available online. Best way to get to that site would be to go to the Midcoast Council homepage under Focus Topics. You'll see a little blurb about it with a link to it. This is rather dense reading. I've been on the project advisory team, and even following it closely, it is pretty dense. So I had asked for a condensed sort of layman summary of the changes that from the 1996 ALUCP to the current one, and I expect to receive that in a day or so, and I'll post that also on our website. And the last item is, I thought Sabrina might be here, but it's, I just got this, the Harbor District Strategic Business Plan that they're working on. They're having a public meeting #1, they call it, on July 10th from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Oceano Hotel, and I'll put the specifics on our website. The meeting announcement will be there, but that's coming up. They want input.
Are you done? I want to piggyback on that because it's unfortunate that meeting is on that day and on that time, because the Big Wave Coastline Design Review hearing is also on that day.
But that's in the afternoon, and
It
this
is
is at
in the
6, so it was going to be a long day.
It is going to be a long day.
Okay. Are there any requested changes to the agenda, council members? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved unanimously. Okay, moving on to our regular agenda. I just want to briefly preview our general order of business for regular agenda items. We have a presentation of the topic. Council members may then ask clarifying questions of the presenter. Then we open public comment, generally limited to 3 minutes each. And you need to come to the podium in order to be heard on the TV recording. And then we will close the public comment, and the council has discussion and decision on any action items. So the first regular agenda item is Highway 1 Congestion and Safety Improvement Project. The Supervisor Horsley asked to come and speak with us tonight on this, and I'll let you take it from there.
Well, thank you very much. And as you know, we had this public meeting that was quite revealing. We have lots of different opinions on. One of the things that we started this project actually, probably even actually about 4 years ago, and it was called Midcoast Mobility Study, and it was Midcoast Mobility Study 1. Then there was a follow-up, Midcoast Mobility Study 2, and over about a 4-year period of time, we've had a number of different public meetings, and we vetted a whole bunch of different things, and we took some things in and dropped some things, and unfortunately, I think by the time we actually kind of distilled it down, we thought that we had heard pretty much what the community wanted. And it's hard to say if the audience that we had the other night, maybe they were never involved in any of these other meetings and stuff. And so in any case, it was not very well received. And that's okay, we understand. So we did get a lot of feedback. One of the things I want to make clear is that Highway 1 is the state of California. It's not the county. And And it's not as if we have unlimited money. We do not. In fact, we don't have any money for construction yet. We have to look for grants. And what we did do is we got some grants, and again, I have to credit Nicholas Calderon from my office, who's done a great job of getting grants from the Transportation Authority. Fortunately, I sit on it, so I'm able to vote on it. And we did get a grant to do the study and permitting process. So it's not, it's not as if, again, there's unlimited money. So, we've got these, we started getting, I started off the meeting by saying, look, under the road is not really feasible. And if you want to think about that, to do, an under the road tunnel, if you will, is, again, I have to point out is that, we have a lot of homeless people, and you're going to end up with homeless people down there. The other is that if you went down 12 feet, it's got to be ADA compliant. And if you think about the kind of disruption and the equipment that you have to have, you'd have to have additional, you'd have to have additional space. You'd end up chewing a whole bunch of additional space that the state doesn't own, we don't own, that they would end up having to pay for. It would be hugely expensive, and we have no reason to believe that they would ever consider building an under-the-road tunnel, if you will. And not only that, even if you did, it would only be one particular area, and you can't go, we're not a bunch of moles that we're gonna go all over the coastline. It just isn't feasible to do it. It's hugely expensive, and there is, it's just something that's not gonna happen. One of the areas that people specifically talked about was around Gray Whale Cove. You could not do it there, because even if you wanted to do it, you couldn't do it there. Again, you'd be chewing up most of the parking lot, and on the other side, on the west side of the road, you'd end up on the mountain. On the other side, you'd end up falling out of the tunnel. So that doesn't work. And I think people have thought, gee, well, they built a tunnel, we could do this too. But remember, a tunnel is built because the people of the United States of America took $500 million. It wasn't the state, it wasn't the county, it was federal money. It was $500 million basically to bore those tunnels, and it took about 7 years. Now, I'm not saying that under the road could cost that much, but it's hugely expensive. It's not going to happen. And the other thing is you'd end up hitting the water table. I'm sure Leonard could tell you that. You're going to hit the water table. You're going to have to de-water. It's really complicated. So we don't talk in terms of things that are really not possible or feasible, and so we kind of eliminated early on. And the other about the over the road, again, same problem. Again, it has to be ADA compliant. It means it has to be for disabled people in a wheelchair. Have got to be able to ramp up and go across. And again, it takes a huge amount of property, very expensive. No reason to believe that the state of California would consider building it. It just is not. It's just not feasible. And the other is that you end up in the view corridor. So those are possibilities. And I tried to say at the beginning, those aren't really possible. We're really not talking about that. So, in any case, at the same time, I understand people. Everybody has a right to opinion, and they can say, that certainly that's what we're looking for, is to have as much public input as possible. So, we kind of looked at all of the comments, and so what we heard at the meeting really is what we will proceed to do would be start talking to Caltrans about adding raised medians in Moss Beach. Now, remember, to do that, first of all, we've got to reduce the speed limit, because you're not going to allow a speed limit of 50 miles an hour, no lighting, and then have concrete center dividers. Because in the middle of the night, somebody's going to crash into it and get into a major collision. So the state is not going to allow that. But what we could conceivably try to do is see if we can lower the speed limit. We can't do it arbitrarily. I can't go out there and say, Caltrans, I want you to take those signs and turn it down to 45 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour preferably. That doesn't work. You have to really demonstrate that somehow the speed can be reduced. So in any case, but we'll talk to Caltrans about adding raised medians and seeing what we can do about Moss Beach. And I heard Leonard loud and clear about reducing light pollution caused by street lights and pedestrian crossing signs. So we understand that. And then reducing some of the, and I also heard, we heard very clear that people are concerned that all these crossings have an impact on traffic flow. So, okay, so we'll start looking at reducing some of them, and then the other thing we heard loud and clear was trying to address the traffic concerns at Cypress. Now, some of the comments that we got, interestingly enough, even on my email systems, was people who dug up in some of the earlier studies traffic roundabouts. Now, we gave that up long ago because there was so much opposition to roundabouts, so we're not about to resurrect that, but we'll look at traffic concerns at Cypress, and one of the things we're gonna have to do are traffic counts. So we're gonna have to do some backup and do traffic counts at Cypress, for example, and seeing if, first of all, I want your support on this, if you're in agreement, to see if we can reduce speed limits. And we'll have to do that by measuring the speed of the average vehicles. And there are things that we think we can do. We think that we can try to measure the speed limit on weekends, because we think the speed actually drops on those days. And if we can convince Caltrans that that is acceptable, then perhaps we can reduce the speed limit. And that may give us the ability to propose center islands. So the other things that, like I just said, we're not pursuing either above grade or below grade crossings. We never were, and we aren't gonna do that now. It's just, I mean, I understand that some people may think that's a great thing, but it just isn't gonna happen. And we're actually not gonna pursue a crossing at Surfers Beach. Again, it's a state highway. It's not our control. We don't control parking. And I know I made some suggestions to my good friend Leonard about parking. And we can talk about that. Leonard and I will talk about that some later point. But we're not, we understand that, when you have parking alongside of the road there, which is legal, we understand that people are gonna, they're gonna exit their car, and they're not gonna go funnel to a single parking lot or parking crossing. But our thought was that if you could create a parking lot on the other side, on the east side, because it's already a parking lot essentially, and we think that if you could make that a more efficient, and if you could funnel it all the pedestrian traffic in one area, but we're going to give that up. We're just going to. There seemed to be too much opposition to that. We were going to do a meeting in July, but we're actually going to cancel that, and that's going to give us some more time to conduct some speed surveys, traffic counts, and actually talk to Caltrans. We're going to do that with our consultants. We actually need those speed surveys and traffic counts to propose, in order for us to propose some of the preferred alternatives. We don't control it. And I know people have said really clearly they want to have center islands, but we don't control that, and we have to do something about the speed. Now, some people may say, "Whoa, that'll slow me down getting to work." But I'm going to go back to my great Uncle Joe, and when he used to drive us along when I was a little kid in San Jose, and he would drive down the road actually 15 miles an hour, real slow, and people honked his horn, and he'd say, "They're only going to get 1 minute ahead of me." And so I'm going to propose that if somebody's going 40 miles an hour versus 50 miles an hour, it doesn't really change that much of your commute in the daytime. It really does not have that much. It has a very minimal impact. If you have to leave for work 5 minutes earlier, I don't see that as a great problem. If we're able to do that to provide what we thought was the real purpose for the project, and what we thought was what people really wanted were some safe crossings. And the reason we located that where we located them was those are the areas where people are crossing most frequently. The areas that I think that I want to continue to pursue with the way in which with the lights and the flashings are, first of all, at Grave Whale Cove. Now, people thought when they saw it, they thought, "Oh, gee, that means that we are restricting parking or eliminating some of the parking." We are not. What they saw in the center was asphalt, and the reason for that is the asphalt, when people pull out into traffic, if you just have a dirt underneath, you tend to have some you don't have good traction, and so while you think you're getting out there at a certain speed, it may not. You may end up, you know, spinning your wheels for a period of time, and it's not very safe. So we think that, I should say me, I think that really is, I really like that because I don't think the light pollution is really a significant issue. There's really no residences around there. And we think that having it's actually like an on-demand red light, that really does stop traffic. And I know, you know, from driving around, I see people all the time on Gray Whale Cove, even during the weekends. And I have to admit, I don't necessarily, you know, on weekends it's so jammed. But you do have people walking right across that roadway, so we think that's a pretty safe way. The other thing about that, we think, I think that's a pretty safe crossing, the way in which it's been designed. But, you know, we're willing to listen if other people think that we should do something different. And the other thing on the west side, what people, I think, did not see, was that there's actually a path that we will create that will lead always up to the walk, or the path that goes down onto the beach. So I think that's a significant improvement in that one area, and we should pursue that. At least that's my opinion. I hope you agree. The other one I think that we want to pursue, or at least I believe is a good one, is at Second Street. And the reason for that is that you've got the restaurant across the street, you have Montero State Beach, you have parking there. And people do cross there. And there is a lot of traffic there. And that really does make a lot of sense to have a crosswalk and the flashing lights. And again, you have to have lights. So I don't want to say I'm locked in stone on that, because I'm not. You know, it's really up to you know, the public. And you know, I also understand that on the coast side, you are never going to get 100% compliance. But what I'd like to get is at least compliance from, and I believe that the MCC, you represent this area pretty well, and if I'd like to get some concurrence on your part. Now, again, I'm not tonight. What I'm going to propose also is that we have a separate study session, and I'd like to see us actually form an ad hoc subcommittee, so that we could have you or some ad hoc subcommittee from MCC. And I know people worry about, you know, secret meetings and stuff. I don't want it to be a secret meeting, but an ad hoc committee. And if you want to appoint some citizens as well, that's fine. If you want to have it open or photographed, or, you know, on television, that's great. But let's have where we can have a real dialogue about these other processes, the rest of the proposals, and have our consultants, and see if we can get Caltrans there as well. So we need a little bit of additional time, because we're kind of pulling back basically a bit. You know, we heard pretty loud and clear. People said, well, you're not hearing us. I think we did hear and have heard them. And I think most of what we showed were things that we've developed over the years, or over the last few years. But that doesn't mean that everybody has seen them, because, you know, there's 12,000 people over here, so you got a meeting of 60. That, you know, that's not the whole community. So somehow, you know, I think, at least with us, let's say me and, you know, my staff and subcommittee from here, and if you want to appoint other citizens, and again, it could be televised, it's fine with me, but let's work together on the succeeding ones. And also, you know, let's talk about the rationale for the Second Street. Let's talk about the rationale for Gray Whale Cove. I think we could make some headway, but we have to do it. We have to have some concurrence. We can't, you know, I don't want to be. Caltrans isn't going to do anything if half the community doesn't want it. You know, if 10% doesn't want it, that's one thing. But if half of the community says, "Oh no, we don't want it," it's this, that, or the rest, then we have there's no point. We're stuck. But, you know, if the goal of the, you know, when I first got elected, I thought the goal was, and I believe it still is, to have some safe crossings. Then I think we could achieve that, but we have to have some degree of concurrence.
I'd like to be
So-
in the subcommittee.
So do council members have any clarifying questions at this time? Laura?
Could I ask that you summarize the changes that you just spoke about in detail?
Yeah, I could. Well, on Gray Whale Cove, it's two things. It's, first of all, it's developing more efficient use of that parking lot. It's also asphalting the parking lot, not the whole thing.
But this was in the original. I mean, changes from what,
I had jotted them down. Does this cover what you're
Oh, okay,
talking about?
fine.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You said you were gonna cancel the July meeting.
Yeah.
I think
Oh.
this is what you're looking for, right?
yes, it's a good
Oh.
thing.
And,
Oh.
you need to do a speed survey
Yes.
and traffic counts.
Right, that's Cypress,
Yeah.
traffic counts of Cypress.
And you're gonna cancel the Surfers Beach crossing,
That's gone.
right? That's gone. And, you also said we have to have lights at crossings.
We do. You cannot,
So you're standing firm on that. And then, you would like to have, ad hoc committee with study sessions, can be open to the public, whatever, to have a dialogue.
Yes.
And the consultants
yeah,
would be there.
there's only two that I'm really stuck on, if you will, or that I'm really sold on. And that is at Second Street and the other, and that's because the reason we chose all the ones that we chose had to do with the fact that that's where most people cross. So Second Street because of Montero State Beach and that Gray Whale Cove. And the other one, we're all, they're optional in all of them. Now, there's one, we had California and Virginia, we had an accident where a kid got hit. I think we had 3 accidents. So that's an area, I mean, those are all, I'm not saying I'm gonna take any of those out. I just wanna, let's have more discussion about those other ones and how to, how to deal with those. And also, we need to have some time to see what is possible with Caltrans. So that's why we have to do the traffic counts and the speed counts and try to reduce the, see if we can convince them to reduce the speed. Because there's an area where the speed limit is 50 miles an hour. If that's the case, they pretty much said that center dividers are not possible. So if we can reduce it to 45 or 40, then they are possible. So we need some time to work on that.
That's my next question. Do you have an idea of the, going forward, just a rough time frame that you have in your mind?
I should ask Nicholas that. Nicholas, first of all, I have to tell you that, he works really hard at this, and he puts his whole heart and soul in this, and we spent the last couple of days talking about where to go from here to where to go from here, because we felt that, somehow we missed something with the community, and we just felt that, how do we kind of, meet an objective of having some safe crossings and get some degree of concurrence and some degree of acceptance from the community. We're not trying to take people out of the car. We did get some people who want us to think that we're trying to put everybody in bicycles. Not true.
One person.
Well, and we are, although we got the other person who sent us an email saying they want bike lanes on Highway 1, and that's not gonna happen. You'd have to really widen the road, and we're not gonna do, and that was not the purpose and the goal for the project. The project was to save crossings. And by the way, I will say that if you believe in global warming, 60% of all greenhouse gases come from cars. So we don't want you on bicycles, but maybe electric cars.
So, Nicholas, did you have an estimate on when we might get to talk about this again? To get to Laura's question?
To confirm the question, when will we have the next round of community engagement?
I'm
Or-
just trying to get a
or
sense of the
anything.
whole project.
Yeah,
So
when you say,
I think, between now and the next community outreach meeting, we'll be gathering additional feedback on what would be redesigned project elements. There will be things like the speed surveys and the traffic
so like
counts.
August or?
So, no, we're thinking fall, when people go back to
September.
schools. As Supervisor
We were
Orsi
thinking-
mentioned,
I'm sorry, Nicholas actually is the expert at this, but I hate to interrupt, but I'm thinking somewhere around September.
yeah, you're right. Because you said that, that's what I think. No, actually, so
Yeah,
that's,
he works on this constantly, and he does talk a lot to Caltrans, so actually, Nicholas really does.
you're absolutely right. I mean, we were thinking fall, which would give
I'm
people.
right, no, you're right,
You're right.
I'm right, oh, you're right.
Fall will give people an opportunity to come back from summer vacations. It would also give us adequate time to do traffic surveys, speed surveys, traffic counts, have adequate meetings with Caltrans. The MCC would be able to have a subcommittee and this study session. So, like Supervisor Porter said, we're looking at
Some of the things on the roadway, like the pocket lanes, you know, for left turn lanes, that we're not, those are still in. It's just that, I see a young lady back there who wanted center dividers. That's the hardest, that's gonna be the hardest thing. That's why we have to do all these traffic counts and speed analysis, see if we can figure out ways of slowing that traffic down. There are things that we think we can do to get that speed limit reduced.
I have a,
But, you know, again, it's gotta be concurrent. I mean, we have people say, no, I wanna go as fast as possible. So, but that, you know, that doesn't really, you know, it doesn't serve, it's difficult, then you can't get safe crossings if people are going 60, 70 miles an hour, so.
one request I have,
Yeah.
for 12 years, I've been trying to get statistics on the traffic incidents or accidents in our area. Can we get that so that we can?
Yeah, no, that's one of the things, that's another thing that the citizens asked for, is traffic collision data. So we'll try and get that as well.
That would be great. And then my last question is, when they propose these different projects, is Caltrans able to do an actual model of what the impact is going to be on the traffic, you know, with whatever is proposed?
You know, Neil, you were part of that original.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, you could.
In the Highway 1 study, there, you know, people should reread it. It's really got a lot of stuff in there. And they had proposed the ultimate goal on reducing speed limits and the different features in there, and they had tables there of just how many more seconds it would take to drive from Montera down to Frenchman's Creek. It is all laid out in the tables in the appendix.
It may be in the
It's good
tables,
stuff.
but the issue is that if you put something, say, Gray Whale Cove, what impact does that have on traffic down at Surfers Beach? There's,
Well,
or
this
if you
is
put in a
questions
meeting.
now, questions now.
Oh, okay, well,
So
that's the information. I'm just asked Supervisor Horsley if
Right,
the,
sorry.
See, I don't think it has
traffic
much,
miles can be done.
just anecdotally, my opinion is it has very little impact. But we could ask Caltrans if they have models. I don't know if they do, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but all I know is I used to be a traffic officer and used to give a lot of tickets. But so, but no,
Probably know best.
I do not believe, so the way it stands now, that people cross all the time, and that, you know, traffic slows down or stops, whatever. So it's not any different, it's just that it makes it a lot safer and it funnels it.
Okay,
At least that's my belief.
I'm
Is that
through.
it? Dan, do you have a question?
Yes. I heard your response on the tunnels and respectfully accept it, but, well,
I
accept it, but
understand.
don't, but anyway, put it off to the side for now, I'm not gonna. You talk about traffic count, and I know that in the past, what was it, month or so, there was, it appears that there was quite a bit of data taken on Highway 1 with, you know, rubber hoses across the road at, you know, many different locations. It looked like wireless cameras that were up. So I didn't hear any comment on that at the meeting, and I'd like to just ask, does the county know much about that? Is there anything, could you comment on?
I haven't heard about
Okay.
any of their surveys or speed limit tests, but I think we're gonna have to do it all over again.
And you mentioned that Second Street and Gray Whale Cove were, you know, very important.
To me.
Is there, you know, like a rationale paper that, and you mentioned that the rationale is gonna be discussed at a future meeting, but I mean, is there any way that it could be published and available to the community? You know, the rationale,
Well, it is it's in those mobility studies. That's where it's at. So it's in that rationale, in the mobility studies 1 and 2. the other thing is just anecdotally is that, that's an area where a lot of people cross, because they're going to the restaurant or they're going to the state beach. So, we chose those areas because that's where most of the pedestrians are crossing. It's not willy-nilly, it's because that's where we know people are actually crossing the roadway, and we think it's actually pretty dangerous. And again, you could look at I can't say what, where it's at in it, but I know that it's in the mobility studies in 1 and 2. One of them is further south and the other is further north. So I think the second one, mobility studies on number 2 is, I think is the, yeah, I think that.
Number 2 is airport double slide, and then the
Yeah.
1 is Miramar airport.
Right.
Okay, so that's your answer. That's where you're gonna find the rationale.
Yeah, I remember that, but it seemed kind of brief. It didn't seem in-depth. I was hoping for something a little more, but, and also, I just want to, yeah, okay. No further questions.
Any other questions from council members? Dave?
I'm not sure it's really a question, but I do feel strongly that there's a real safety issue here, and I agree that we can't just drop this until we get 100% agreement. I do think we need to do something. I'm going to be on the ad hoc committee. I've heard from a number of other people who want citizen involvement. I might be able to get some of them.
Anyone else on the council?
One quick, the raised medians kept coming up, but there's also some areas where they have the painted line medians. That was never brought up. Is that something you mentioned? Caltrans does not allow raised medians, the non-raised medians, but marked, well marked, whether it's with the green, like the new popular, bike stuff, and the bike lanes are painted bright green in some areas. Then with a lot of positive feedback from the community, it really stands out. Maybe a non-raised, but a double yellow line, circle with bright green may not provide a safety issue for fast cars at night, but would provide in the daytime, the bright light, or, maybe a road light or something at night would provide something that just wasn't discussed.
No, maybe it's just, my bias is that when it's just a painted, median, that to me is not as good as a concrete, of having something that's raised. I don't even care if it's a bioswale, but I think something that is a much more defined separation between the pedestrian and the roadway is better.
But not allowed.
Well, it's allowed if and only if the speed limit is, they actually do it if the speed limit's 40. We might be able to get away with it at 45, but we cannot get it with 50. See, I have good peripheral vision. I can see Nichols going like that, so I know I got it right. But I do know that anyway. But
I have one question, which is when the subcommittee would meet, when he expects the subcommittee to meet.
well, I think what we would do is, we could meet early on and talk about the traffic counts and speed counts early on. And as soon as we maybe we could do that within the next 3-4 weeks.
Okay.
I'd just like to tie in with what Dave said, and this last thing from Laura, that about let's not lose momentum here. This has been a very long process, and it was 2 years ago that we were applying for this grant, and this is the first work product we've seen. We're eager to, this is important, and I don't want to delay too long, and it's important to do it right and everything, but it would be nice to be able to talk soon again and feel like we're making progress. And okay, so I'd like to open public comment. New Merrilees?
And Neil Merrilees, a resident of Moss Beach. Nicholas and Don, please don't give up on us. I know that was a rough meeting. This time of year, nobody's around because school is out and everybody that's been wanting to go on vacation forever has taken off. And certainly the people whose kids are in school and are gone now really want safe crossings. I firmly believe that the community will get behind safe crossings, and I think the community deserves one safe crossing in each community at least. And I think one of the big problems with that meeting, I think, was the work product that they showed the community, in that when you present somebody with 5 crossings in Montera with flashing lights at each one, you can understand that people would freak out. And I think often the coast, their response to county projects is that they want less. It's not that they want nothing. It's they want something that's efficient, that's inexpensive, that is low-key, and that is safe. It might not be completely safe, like a stoplight would be pretty safe, but something between a painted line and a stoplight, I think, is what the community wants and needs and is doable. And I just wanted to point out too that every community is different. Please don't give up on a crosswalk at Surfers Beach. A lot of people cross there. It's actually really dangerous to cross at the light because you have to walk out into the road. There are wetlands there. There's never going to be a walkway in those wetlands. So you have to walk out on the road with your surfboard to the light and then walk back along the road. You'd be crazy. So, of course, people cross. And Surfers Beach is different than the other parts of the coast in that there's no left turn, crazy intersections, so that if there was a raised median that started at one light and went to the other light, and you lowered the speed limit to 40 miles an hour in order to get that, I think that would be incredibly safe, and then people could cross. You could look one way and cross, and then look one way and cross. You wouldn't even have to have blinking lights. And then in Moss Beach, the problem with the work product, they presented 2 alternatives for Moss Beach, and they said we could have 2 crossings or we could have 1 crossing. And if we have 1 crossing, it's going to be California and Winky, which is the most dangerous place to cross in Moss Beach imaginable, because there are 5 different ways that people come into that intersection. And if there's 1 crossing in Moss Beach, it should probably be between the Mini Mart and the burrito stand. Because you go to the burrito stand, you want to get a 6-pack of beer, boom, you go across the street. Plus, there's a kids park there, and there's good access to the Marine Reserve. So, I'm guessing that would be a good place. Cypress would be pretty good too, but and I don't know whether that would have to have blinking lights, or whether people would want blinking lights. Whether a raised median is possible when you've got all the cutouts for left turns. There wouldn't be much of a median left. You'd be standing on a 6-inch strip. So maybe raised median would not be effective there. And in Montera too, in my heart, I'm not going to give up on the overcrossing, because there is one place in Montera where you could have an overcrossing around the lighthouse in Montera Water and Sanitary District. Let's put that on the back burner. Let's put that'll be our pie in the sky option that we can try and fund and try and plan someday. But I'm not going to give up on that possibility, because I think that would be really cool. But if we had 1 crossing at Costanera at 2nd Street, there is only 1 state beach in Montera, and it's there. Yeah. And that is the kind of the gateway to all of Montera. So that's a funnel. So if we get 1 crosswalk there, flashing in the street, or truly people are worried about the light pollution and worried about flashing light. Okay, and I understand that, and so whatever options there are that minimize that, I think would fly. And if you have another meeting, please have it after school starts. Thank you.
Leonard.
Where to start? I agree with a lot of what Neil said, but when some of us were arguing against the signal at Coronado in 1998, the proponents were arguing safe crossing, and I said nobody's going to walk down to Coronado to cross there. And so now we're hearing that I was right. signals are not necessarily the solution. A number of years ago, there was a woman on a bicycle hit by a sheriff's deputy at 6 o'clock in the morning at the signal at Capistrano. I don't know who had the right of way. It almost doesn't matter because at 6 o'clock in the morning, some people are going to think they could ignore the signal, whether it was the woman on the bicycle or the deputy, I don't know. But signals give a false sense of security in a lot of cases. As far as what the speed of traffic is on Highway 1 at Surfers Beach, there's two values. It's either the speed limit that's posted or it's near zero. And there's not a lot in between now. So, if we can, normally I don't support reduced speed limits, but if we can go to 45 and get the center median, and I like the idea of just doing it painted, because you could do that pretty quick at minimal cost. As far as roundabouts go, I think you need to do some serious community polling on roundabouts. You heard from the three people that don't like them because they don't know how to turn the steering wheel. But I think that the argument that I give people is 25 through a roundabout's a lot faster than zero. And when you have a signal and you have left turn arrows all over the place, you're stopped 7/8 of the time, basically. And that's really a disaster. As far as the parking at Coronado, I'd really like to pull up the screen partway so I can point to something on the aerial photo there.
You got about a minute left.
Okay, well, this is my last one. It's been suggested that a really obvious place for parking in this area is this section of Caltrans right-of-way. Went out and measured it. It's 1,680 feet from here to the call box over here. And I forgot to bring a piece of paper with me. I think it's 60 feet this way. That's a heck of a lot of parking spaces. It's at highway level here, then it's a rise, and it comes down to slightly above highway level at Coronado. So the obvious thing to do is have people come in at the entrance that leads to the fire road, have people come in there. You can have one lane going all the way down the diagonal parking and then a return lane, and I think there's actually enough space for 2 rows of diagonal parking, but I have to go do the arithmetic on. And then this has the really obvious benefit that if people are parking here, they're going to cross the signal. So you solve a number of problems, and you get rid of the parking along the highway, which is a major safety hazard in itself.
Thank you, Leonard. Bill?
Hello, Supervisor Horsley and MCC. So I sent a letter today. I wasn't sure if I'd get back here in time because I had a conflicted schedule, but I'm going to focus mainly on Moss Beach because that's where I live and that's what I'm most familiar with. I think what I just heard you say is you are going to open up the discussion again about raised medians at both Virginia and California, which I fully support. The idea of it acting as a traffic calmer and that pedestrians and bicyclists who are crossing only have to cross one lane at a time, I think will serve our community just because of the geography and topology of Moss Beach. The highway pretty much cuts through the middle of Moss Beach, and we have people on the west side who want to go over to the businesses on the east side or the park or the post office, and vice versa. The people on the west side, obviously they moved out here so they can get to the ocean and the Bluff Trail. So it's probably one of the reasons why we've had so many pedestrian accidents in Moss Beach itself. So I really want to see that happen. What I was confused about, and I talked to Nicholas at the last meeting, is that raised medians because of speed limit around 50, but yet there was one for Marine Boulevard at the south end that had a raised median, and there the speed limit is going from 50 to 55 at the airport. So there's a disconnect in that, but the best thing I can offer you is let me know when you're going to actually do a traffic check, and I will get all my Uncle Joes out to drive at 15 miles an hour to make sure that the speed limit is really slow on that day. Just give me like a few hours. I'm sure I could get a half a dozen people.
Okay.
Some other quick things that I noticed. I'm concerned about the crossing at Graywell Cove. I think the crossing could be better positioned a little bit further south, and with the idea of optimizing the line of sight. Where it is now, it's pretty close to a curve, and people coming down won't necessarily see the people coming up from the beach, crossing west to east there. It's pretty iffy. Likewise, at Carlos 16th and Highway 1, where the plan is to cross over to the lighthouse, that's also in a bad position on a curve. And I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure that people, once they get past, Valamar Street, headed north on Highway 1 in Morris Beach, basically there's no other cross traffic there. It's a long, rounded curve. Speed limit probably picks up to about 60 miles an hour there. And they are coming down hard and fast to Carlos Street and where that crossing is going to be at 16th. I would seriously consider moving that again a little bit further north, closer to 16th Street, where you have, again, an optimal line of sight possible. I would also ask you to take a quick look at trying to merge Carlos and 16th first and then only have one entrance onto Highway 1. There is a triangle there, and I'll sit by my offer in the email I sent to you. If you provide the coffee, the donuts, and the radar gun, I don't want to give people tickets. I'll just collect the data during rush hour. I'm sure, 55 or 60, probably I'm underestimating it at that time of the day. But I'll do that for you. Anyway, I think that's the only ones I can think of. Otherwise, I'll send more email. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Carl?
It's easy not to immediately degenerate back into these point-by-point, place-by-place things. I wanted to say that one thing that's come out of this process, this traffic and trails or safety crossings and so forth, is I thought that at this last meeting, you have with plus or minus 100 yards, one way or the other, you have the locations for where the safe crossings need to be nailed. And they are essentially the same as we were coming up with 20 years ago when we were looking at this stuff. So I think they're nailed, and I also think it would be a great shame to eliminate any of them at this time, and to just have a couple of what are, well, it's important for residents at the north end of Montera at 2nd Street, but that is as much a recreational crossing as anything else because of the beach. Gray Whale Cove is recreational crossing, and we're really doing nothing, if that's what it gets boiled down to at this time, to solve this safe crossing for people in the communities. And there's a lot of this got reinvigorated when a kid was killed in Moss Beach. Most people on the coast side haven't been here long enough, but on our former Parks and Recreation Committee, a kid was killed in Montera crossing the street. And his father was on our Parks and Recreation Committee. So there have been a number of accidents along the way, and it's not making those places any safer, and there's nobody who doesn't want people, especially kids, to be able to have a crossway across the street. That said, no matter where you put these crossings and no matter how well designed they are, there will always be people who ignore them. We're always going to have people crossing wherever they darn please when they come up to the road, and we're always going to have accidents. The idea is to get as safe as we can within a feasible thing. The other thing, I think you get a lot of pushback, and I'm looking right at you because you're the one who takes the brunt of this at these meetings. Usually I have to stare at Nicholas. You get a lot of pushback because a lot of the designs that come up and are presented at these meetings and so forth look like, well, they are a step in the direction of more pavement, more urbanization, and so forth. And you immediately get people like me against you because we don't live here. The people who like living here, many of us like living here because it's not like those places. The word improvement in our minds does not include paving and so forth. That's degradation of where we live. Okay, this comment, growth, the word growth, that is just built so deeply into our economic and psychological culture that people think that's a positive term. It's not. Overgrowth destroys. Excuse me. Well, I have a couple of more things. One thing I would like to mention that has been forgotten in several comments so far today, and in your consideration of what you say is not feasible is the Pacific Coast Bike Route. And I keep bringing this up. Caltrans formally took over the responsibility for maintaining the Pacific Coast Bike Route from Oregon to Mexico. And it was formerly the Bicentennial Bike Route, created in 76 for a bicycle route. They're responsible for it. The only district of Caltrans that plays it up at all is District 1 up on the North Coast. This district of Caltrans likes to forget it, okay? And they're responsible for maintaining a bike route down our coast. Thank you.
Sabrina?
Hi. I was bummed to miss the meeting last Wednesday. I had a Harbor District meeting, so I couldn't make it. And I had to work in the city tonight, so here I am. I've got a few comments, and I understand tonight is more about process.
Yes.
So just a couple comments about that first. Just from what I gathered watching the video of the last meeting, I did watch the whole video, it seemed to me that there might be a disconnect between what was discussed and the whole process that went on with the charrette and coming up with alternatives and whatnot, and where the community was really engaged and involved. And then apparently since then, there was some firm hired to implement some sort of engineering plan, and that's what I could gather from watching the video. And it seems to me that there's something incongruent about the process that the public went through and the process that the planners have implemented. And I would hate to see money wasted on engineering plans that don't match up with what the community is going to accept, because that would of course be a waste, and then it will have to be redone, which kind of looks like where we're at today. I'm sure they were planning on modifying things anyway after getting public input, so here we are. But it looks like, you know, there's a lot of modifications, so it sounds like there's going to be some sort of an ad hoc or subcommittee formed. And I would hope that those meetings would be open to the public. So if public members wanted to sit in on the ad hoc subcommittee meetings, that they could, or maybe they'd be videotaped, or some way that process could be public. Because obviously this plan is never going to go anywhere if we don't get a lot of public participation and buy-in. And the buy-in part is really, really important. I think that many people here want to see changes happen. They know, you know, it's kind of past due. We really need to improve safety on Highway 1. But the way to do it is going to be a subject of debate. And if people are, if they feel like they've been shut out of that process, then they're going to have an immediate reaction that they distrust the process. So it's really important that the public be engaged and they feel that they can trust the process and that the process is open and public and that they're having a dialogue with the planners and that the planners are, you know, on the same page with the public's interests. So having said that, I know that's really hard to do, and you know, I'm sure that it's going to be a work in progress. So on to other things here. I'll try to be really quick. As far as the bike lane on Highway 1, I'm not sure exactly what the Pacific Coast Bike Route entails. I'd like to learn more about that, and I will. But if there was any way to have a painted bike lane incorporated into the plan for Highway 1, I'd love to know if we have a painted bike lane, and I just mean a striped bike lane, anywhere else on the coast of California on Highway 1, because I think that the need is definitely there. And obviously the parallel trail that we've all been wanting and waiting for is going to take some time, but striping a bike lane could happen really quickly. So that would at least provide some safety for bicyclists who are traveling on Highway 1, which is of course a very popular bike route for visitors and California residents. And then as far as Graywell Cove goes, I'm not going to comment much on that, but I would love to see a tunnel looked at as an option in addition to the type of crossing that's been spec'd out now. I know tunnels are challenging and there are concerns about it, but we did build twin tunnels to get through Montera Mountain, and it could be done. And I think that that is such a safety challenged spot. I can't think of a safer way to do a crossing there. So I just hope that a tunnel isn't off the table and that that could be factored in as a potential option. And then as far as Cypress Avenue goes, it looks like roundabouts are not included in any of the plans. Roundabouts were something that were discussed at length when we were going through the public process. And a roundabout at Cypress Avenue would be a tremendous benefit for safety for the community. And I've already sent Nicholas a long email about that, so I won't get into too much about this, but I would like to point out that in Lake Tahoe, in North Lake Tahoe, around the Truckee area, and now in Kings Beach, they are rife with roundabouts, and they're just putting in a new roundabout in Kings Beach. Roundabouts are extremely successful.
Sabrina, could you wrap it up?
Okay. They have found that they reduce emergency response time, and they also provide safe crossings without any flashing lights. So it is a really elegant solution to a lot of our problems, and Cypress Avenue and Highway 1 would be perfect for it. Last thing I'll mention is Surfers Beach. I agree with Neil's suggestion that we could use a median there. I do have concerns about a flashing crossing there, given how congested we have that area already. And I would like to see improvements at both of the intersections on either side of Surfers Beach. And I disagree with the comment that we cannot put in a trail through the Willows, the wetland area along Highway 1 near Surfers Beach, because the Coastal Act does make provisions for doing a trail, not a road or a structure, but just to put in a trail. It could be like a raised wooden planked type of thing. But if we had a trail, the parallel trail that stretched the Surfers Beach segment from the two intersections on the east side of Highway 1 along Highway 1, people would use the intersections. The reason they're not using the intersections now is because there is no trail and it's hard to get to. So that's why that section should be the very first that gets the new segment of the parallel trail. It is the number one place where we need that parallel trail first. Thank you for your time.
Kate Handel? Is Kate here?
Sorry. Kate had to step out, and she just asked that I say one thing in her place. She had
Are
to
you
leave.
John?
I'm John, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You're next.
She just wanted to express concern about measuring traffic and speed during the summer months. She didn't feel that that would be an accurate representation of what goes on during regular times of the year. I'm just saying that in her place.
Did you have a comment also?
I did, yes.
You're next.
Well, I don't want to get into the details of every one of our little ideas of what's going to be going on the coast, because I just feel like that seems to be ineffectual, and people seem to be forgetting about what's being said from one meeting to another. In general, though, I do want to applaud Supervisor Horsley's idea of convening a subcommittee to talk about this in more detail, and I really think we should have Caltrans there to let us know what is feasible given certain amounts of money. But with that said, I also want to respectfully disagree with Supervisor Horsley's comments about this, where we're going to be going with this project. I kind of feel like you're limiting the scope before we've had a real chance to investigate what is possible. Feels like you want to put a Band-Aid over an amputation. I mean, we've got two major problems going on: safety and accessibility to the coast, and then speed, and people being able to get up and down Highway 1, which is a highway. And people want to be able to get to 92. Yes, sure, if you slow down from 50 to 45, it's only going to cost you an extra minute or two. But there's also crosswalks, which are going to bring people to a complete stop. And we're not talking 5 minutes, we're talking 10 to 15 minutes difference, possibly. So In my mind, and, you know, this has been dismissed already, it seems, even though we're going to be having a subcommittee, tunnels are the best option. They allow traffic to continue through the highway without being stopped, and we remove pedestrians from an open highway, and which, you know, they're at great risk. And I know they're very expensive, you know. The reasons given against them that I heard from Supervisor Horsley was homeless people are going to sleep there. Has to be ADA compliant, I agree. We're not moles. Gray Whale Cove, you can fall out into the cliff. That we're going to dig into a water table, and it's expensive. I think the only thing of all of those that I agree with is it's going to be expensive. I agree. The tunnels going through Devil Slide were expensive, but we have come out of this years later with a successful solution. I don't think we need to have a multitude of tunnels going across the whole length. I mean, I think we can probably do with just two. One at Surfers Beach, maybe one at Gray Whale Cove. I don't know why we're already dismissing an overpass at 16th Street across the street from the Montero Water District. There are berms already there. It doesn't require a lot of construction. Again, if Caltrans was present, maybe they could provide for us an educated assessment on that. So I'm looking forward to the subcommittees. Please advertise them. Please make them open to everybody who they you know, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who actually have the same concerns. They're just not able to make it. So if you just advertise it, make sure we're there. And I'll continue to be present. Thank you.
One more speaker, but I just wanted to ask a question. Public outreach and getting news about the meetings is on my mind all the time. So how do you find out? Do you check the MCC website? Where do you need to find this out from?
I just recently signed up with a site called nextdoor.com.
Okay,
Somebody told me about it.
I post there?
Yep, and
okay.
then my wife she's home with my 3 kids, so she sends me in her place, but she's part of the Coastside Mothers Club, and so it goes through.
We wouldn't have that email list, so I mean, I would encourage people to explore the midcoastcommunity.org website, midcoastcommunitycouncil.org. I really try to make that useful. Pertinent Midcoast stuff, you should be able to find it from just looking at the homepage. And you can even subscribe to get emails on new posts there so that you won't miss an important meeting like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And is it possible that if it goes to something like midcoastcommunity.org, that it would then shoot out to other websites or announcement like Coastside Mothers Club or Nextdoor.com or something like that, or everybody should just go to one place?
Basically, people if they want direct emails, they need to subscribe to something, because I try my best to gather emails. You know, I asked Nicholas for the sign-in sheet. Half those email addresses you can't read, and then there's always people like, why are you emailing me? Who the heck are you? You know, and so we'll work on this, but you know, do check the MCC website, and you can subscribe to that.
You should specifically mention the MCC agendas.
Yeah, you can also sign up to receive email agendas.
At that site?
On our website, it tells you how to sign up for the agenda list. Okay, one more speaker.
Why don't you tweet when you put a new post up?
Just a suggestion. Just what I need. Chris?
Thank you.
Chris Liang? Oh, I have 2 more speakers. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I thought there was somebody before me. My name's Chris Lang. I live in Moss Beach, and I'm going to repeat a lot of what everybody has said already tonight, that I agree that we should try and prevent as much light noise as possible. And I do prefer the pedestrian medians, raised or not, and turning lanes at Cypress and Virginia. I cannot tell you how often I see people come ripping down Highway 1, turning onto California to go to Fitzgerald, and by the time they hit the second block, they're still at 45 miles an hour. There's kids in the street, there's dogs, and it is frightening in that first block of California, not to mention the fact that there are other streets pouring into that, and the restaurant and everything else. We just had a big block party for 3 blocks in front of Fitzgerald in either direction, and we talked about the traffic calming study, and I think that you would be surprised to discover that there's been a lot of turnover in our neighborhood, and a lot of new people would support traffic circles. please don't abandon that idea. There's a lot of support, we've heard a lot of support for it in the room, and I know that in our 3-block radius, we're really supportive of that. I'd also like to see traffic accident data, if that can be made available to us. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Deborah Malone?
The name? No, listening.
Deborah Malone.
Thank you. You mentioned how to get information out about meetings and these kind of public feedback sessions and all that. Well, I would actually encourage going back to the old print format. I mean, you're focusing a lot on internet access, but not everybody has internet access. Not everybody wants internet access or uses it. I would encourage more in the newspaper and maybe even consider mailings, getting some information out in print that would help people get educated and be informed. Because again, yeah, sure, there's Facebook, there's the MCC website, but I think sometimes there's something to be said for the old way of doing things and getting information out in print. With regard to the pedestrian crossings and all that kind of stuff, I just want to focus on Montera because I live in Montera, and specifically 7th, 8th, and 9th Street, the proposals. 8th Street, please do not push all left and right turns onto the highway onto 8th Street. Put a left turn, which we already have, at 9th. This diagram has eliminated that left turn, and that is actually one of the safer places to turn left going south on Highway 1 out of Montera. You have longer sight lines in either direction, and the signs at the restaurants and the gas station and the bed and breakfast don't block your view like they do at 8th. And if you push all left and right turns onto 8th Street, you're going to then have traffic backing up onto Main Street in Montera. I mean, I live there, I drive there every day. So the fact that I see a diagram that makes only a right turn at 9th Street and puts some sort of a warning thing and takes away that center pocket or lane for turning south on Highway 1 at 9th Street, I think that's a very bad idea. So I'd like you to try to take a closer look at that and make sure there's a left turn and a right turn out of 9th Street. Again, going back to 8th Street, you don't want to push all left and right turns onto the highway at 8th Street. That's a very busy street already. And there is also no stop sign on Main Street at 8th, so if you start pushing all the traffic in and out at that point, you're going to have serious problems there. And you're going to have people illegally making a left turn onto the highway at 9th if you don't allow for it legally. And 7th Street, the right turn with the crosswalk right there, people have talked, I've read some of the comments, people have talked about putting it on the left side or the right side, north side, south side. I think the south side is safer, but I don't know if there's a way to put a right turn pocket there, which would, I also encourage you to look at that a little bit more, right turn pockets wherever possible, because right turns, people slowing down, slow up traffic on the highway. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close the public comment, except I have a written comment that was submitted by, that I was asked to read, submitted by Len Erickson, former Midcoast council member. He says, each of the following crossings needs a separate meeting and review process, and this order reflects my view of priority. First is Moss Beach, which is the highest priority for Midcoast. Second, Graywell Cove is the highest priority for the visiting public. Third, 2nd Street, Montera. And the fourth one, 16th Montera at the Lighthouse, which would need Caltrans participation. And the last one is 7th Street in Montera and the treatment of the middle lane. And then he says the following should be deferred until related actions move forward. Marata Road should be incorporated with the design of the East Side Multimodal Trail in the Midcoast, which will intersect with the Half Moon Bay Trail. And also Surfers Beach should wait for the design of the west side improvements and allow, we're not a sanitary district, to comment on a process for the role of their land. Thank you, Len Erickson. Okay, so back to the council. Do we have a plan here? Are we, okay, why don't each council will go in turn. Your feeling on what we arrive at, where we're going from here.
Yeah, I think ongoing committee meetings are good. Clearly, you know, we need to keep the public involved, even if it hasn't been said plenty of times. And we're never going to get all the input. People do not give input until they see something they don't like. That's human nature, unfortunately. But we can certainly get as much as possible.
Yeah, anything else?
Yes, I just want to say briefly that I think a lot of energy would have been saved if there was some median meetings in between, just to kind of go the process along. I think it was a little bit, you had the published study, nobody really knew what was kind of going on. Yes, there were some vague things here, and then all of a sudden, you know, 2 weeks before the meeting, we see the pictures. So, and even the night of the meeting, it was, you know, this is it. They didn't really give much. I thought that, you know, more rationale as to why. Yes, there was some, but I think that there could have been a little bit, just more discussion about options, pros and cons of all the different options, to just, and also a summary of the conclusions at each step of the game to help somebody that's coming in at the 10th hour to know what was already you know, just mentioned before. So I think that there could be improvements on that, and I am for further discussion.
Chris?
I agree with Dan. I think it's a wise choice to postpone the July meeting based on the meeting that occurred last week. Unfortunately, I didn't get to attend, but I did watch the video, and again, I think it's a wise choice. Whether you know, the county agrees or already has something in mind or had a plan, whatever happens in the future, it was wise to postpone the July meeting and do further study and let the community come back from the summer and kind of think it over a little bit. After that meeting, maybe the community members want to kind of like chew through, you know, watch the video again and kind of consider everything, read the documents a little better. So I think that everyone should appreciate that, that stance. The other comment I'd like to make is, that said, I guess one criticism I would have with the process is it seems like some things were discounted before the process started that didn't necessarily reflect the input of the community, and I particularly refer to the underpassings. Overcrossings I can kind of see, although I do feel that there is an opportunity for one there at Carlos and 16, even at Gray Whale Cove. But you know, to have discounted those right off the bat when they seem like a logical option to consider, and we have some right here on the coast, 40 miles south of here. There's at least 2 of those exact type of tunnel crossings, underpasses, to connect the east side of Wilder Ranch to the west side of Wilder Ranch underneath Highway 1. I would also cite the much larger and more urban community of Santa Barbara, which used to have Highway 101 running through it with stoplights at every single road crossing. I went to college there in the 80s. It was a nightmare. But the city and the county, it was a big bite to take, and they didn't want to take it, and they didn't want to take it until it got to the point where it just the traffic was unbelievable. And so what they did is they put underpasses, every road went under, and now driving through Santa Barbara is much easier. It's beautiful, it's easy to get down there, so those underpasses, I think, are really something to be considered, especially if we're talking about traffic flow and pedestrian and bicyclist safety. If there's an underpassage, I could feel confident sending my 10-year-old kid across the Highway 1 to Surfers Beach. Right now, no. And as far as traffic flow, any kind of pedestrian crossing is going to affect the flow. And the thing about the Uncle Joe thing is, yes, if your difference between 50 and 40 miles an hour getting somewhere, there's not that much of a difference. But the problem is, it's the coming to a stop and then starting up and then coming to a stop. And I'd also like to say that the type of vehicle traffic has changed since the tunnel. I am now seeing huge semis with redwood trees loaded up there. And when those things come to a stop, they take a while to stop. They take a while to get started. I was just behind one the other day that was, took forever to get going again. That's a big difference than the difference between 50 and 40 miles an hour. So again, to me, underpasses. So that's, but again, I appreciate the way you guys have taken a beat here. I think that was a good choice, and I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Joel?
Well, Lisa, I think you were really correct in saying that you were happy with the momentum, and I think that's really important to keep that going. But I think that it's also kind of come back to the public outreach portion. It's come up a couple different times. How are people able to get information from the website? How are we getting information out to the people? I wasn't at that last meeting. I don't know how many people attended, but it was mentioned that there's a little bit of turnover in Moss Beach with new residents. So this might be something that would come back. I think we're seeing some more younger families in the coast. So to put it back to the people a little bit, you might get some new ideas or maybe old ideas. If this has been going on for 20 years, I understand, but it's still going on now, so kind of look at that. I also agree with the comment that the traffic study might not be done appropriately if it was over the summertime. It is totally different traffic patterns. So look at the timing on that. And then I agree with Neil saying that at least one crossing per community. I definitely want one in Moss Beach. I'm a little biased in that, but overall, I think that was some community involvement.
Laura?
I think the biggest frustration is that we spent a couple years determining and having meetings with the community. And we came up with the recommendations, and it felt like there was a huge disconnect with the consultants. And so I guess my question would be, how could we prevent that from happening going forward? And the second thing is, maybe we have the July meeting, and we have it in El Granada, and we do it south, and we get even more input from people to see how people in a different area, primarily people were focused on Montero and Moss Beach, but we didn't hear from very many people in El Granada. So I'm not sure it's the best thing to just stop the process in the second, right in the middle here. I totally agree and support the subcommittee and moving forward with some momentum. And thank you for making this happen. It's been a couple of years.
Okay, I would like to echo what Neil said. Don't give up on us, and I'm sorry for the tone of the meeting. And, when I look at it, and I took notes on what people said and just focused on the content of what they said, I think there were some real clear themes, and I don't think that you totally missed the mark or anything like that. I think it just needs to be tweaked. And I'm also a realist, and I understand this was supposed to be in the action plan. This was the first high priority, near-term project to get some safe crossings, and so I would eager to have it happen and to keep moving along with this, and there comes the realism, because if you talk about, if you had a tunnel your 10-year-old could cross, well, you're not going to get a tunnel before your kid's grown up, and it's like, if we want something, it's got to be simple. And I think within the scope of this project, we worked with Nicholas on the grant application. We knew what this was about specifically at these locations for crossings, raised medians, turn lanes, And I think, you know, the only new concept that I brought up at the meeting was the left merge to get on the highway, and I think that fits within the scope of this project. And if we can just do what we can to try and do some traffic calming, work with Caltrans, see what we can get from them, and get some project on the ground.
Let me just make a quick comment, is that this is really not a county project. It was really a project, this is really the state of California, and the reason that my office is doing it is because we hear from our constituents that they want safe crossings. So it's not, you know, it's the county of San Mateo is not gonna build it. It's really gonna be Caltrans, so we have to talk to Caltrans about what's possible. I remind people that the tunnel took, what, 20 years, a couple of decades, and $500 million of federal money. It wasn't state money, it wasn't county money, it was $500 million. Now, you know, tunnels under the roadway certainly wouldn't be that expensive, but if you look at the geography, they are not physically possible, like, for example, Surfers Beach. Not unless you move the whole roadway eastward, which eventually they'll have to do. But you would end up wiping out the trail there to be able to do something like that. So, you know, and, you know, if you want to move the road eastward, you're going to have to do an extensive CEQA project, EIR project. There's all kinds of wetlands. It's not really possible, and I'll guarantee it's not possible physically. It's not physically possible at Gray Whale Cove. But you know, if people want to talk about, you know, we can talk to Caltrans, but remember, it's not the county, it's not us, it's the state of California. So what we have to talk about is what really is possible. The only reason I talked about the two that I really favor is that I think that they're the least objectionable. That's 2nd Street and Gray Whale Cove. And I'm not discounting any of the others. There is an advantage of having, you know, first of all, I don't believe that people during commute hours are crossing the highway. I think it really occurs more on weekends. So I kind of discount that idea that people are going to be stopping constantly, that it's going to slow everybody down. But in any case, you know, I think it's an opportunity for us to go back, you know, rethink, re-examine, take a look at it again. And again, it's, you know, we're not going to get 100% concurrence. I understand that. There are people going to still think we ought to do this, that, or the next thing. But I just wanted to, you know, we can work together to figure out. I just think the only reason I mentioned those two is I think they were the least controversial. They were the ones that people did not really, you know, really didn't hammer us too much about those two. The rest of them, there was a lot of concerns. And by the way, you know, I don't particularly mind the tone. That was fine with me. I didn't, I actually was not disturbed or distressed by it. I thought people have real strong opinions, and I think it's because people love this place. And that's why they have really strong opinions. So I'm not really, it doesn't, you know, I don't, that was fine with me. I understand.
So are we good?
I love this place too. So,
I'm sorry, can I just say, I don't think anybody here feels like it was all bad.
no,
You know,
can I say that? I don't think so.
We don't have to start all over again.
No, we don't think so either. We thought there was a lot of good comments. In fact, Nicholas wrote them all down afterwards, and that's kind of why we kind of distilled it to some extent. No, so we don't, you know, we're not upset at all. We took all the comments, there were a lot of good comments, but it also gave us pause that we really need to go a little slower. Not stop it, but just kind of take a little bit more time to think it through.
We really appreciate you coming out tonight and
first of all, I really appreciate all the comments that we heard tonight, and I know we will take them down and consider them as well. And so I know Nicholas was writing them all down. So I do appreciate people coming out, and I appreciate all of your comments as well. You know, ultimately, we'll make it a better project. You may not get everything you want, but if we get close.
Get something.
Get something.
It's gonna be a combination of things, and I think finding the right combination is what the ultimate goal is gonna be. We don't need to start all over again.
And we'll ask Caltrans about, you know, what would you do? I do, by the way, when you talked about the over the roadway, because I had suggested that same area once before, and we thought, oh, no, don't do that, because nobody will want that. But that's down the road, okay?
So-
By the way, one other quick comment. There is a precedent for dropping the speed limit on Highway 1. Somebody was mentioning during the discussions after the meeting that Davenport got the speed limit dropped to 45. And it's a very similar situation to Moss Beach.
Montera, just a few years ago, 50 to 45, when they said they couldn't do it because people were going faster than that.
Yeah, you wouldn't drive 45 through Davenport unless the sign clearly said you better. You know, so
Well,
yeah, they did bring some pressure to bear there.
Yeah, well, I know.
Are you going to stay for our next agenda item?
What's your next agenda item?
It's sort of related. It's access at the gas station there in Moss Beach to the highway. Shall
I'll
we,
stay.
is this
I'll
going to,
listen.
it should be short. I just have a short presentation. Is this gonna, oh, we have need screen down, lights off, and the projector on. What do we have to do? Why are we trying?
If I need more paper.
Oh,
They found my
I have a whole rodeo pad here. It's such sweet paper.
Oh my God, what happened? No, those lights can stay on. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is about Highway 1 access openings in West Moss Beach. Basically, there's 2 blocks there. Where's my cursor? Okay, got it. Okay, so the Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Improvement Study recommends limiting highway access openings to improve safety and mobility, and specifically to reduce the number of access openings on the Moss Beach east side. In fact, we even saw a suggestion of that in this crossing design. The Highway 1 study is mute about access openings on the west side of Moss Beach, where there's 2 block-long sections of uncontrolled vehicle access. In the past, community members have appealed to the MCC to address this issue, and the current planning, as I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention, calls for connections for the crossings to pedestrian facilities. So the Caltrans Project Development Procedures Manual has a section on access openings, which says on expressways, which is what we have, access from private property is permitted, but the size and number of openings are held to a minimum. Parcels that have access to another public street are not allowed access to the expressway, and access openings to an expressway are limited to 1 opening per parcel. So the Moss Beach gas station at Highway 1 in Vermont, this is the 2011 Google Street View, and you can see between the viewer and the pumps, there's a curb and a landscaped area. Granted, there's not much landscaping, but that was what it was intended for. And so there's the curb, the landscaping, there's 2 highway access driveways on Highway 1 and 1 access driveway on Vermont. Okay, now this is a 2013 Google view, and somewhere between 2011 and 2013, the curb and the frontage landscaping area have been removed and paved over. This, as far as I can tell on the online permit site, there's no permit for this, and this leaves unrestricted vehicle access across the entire highway frontage. Pretty much the parcel is entirely impermeable surface, and there's like this no man's land then for pedestrians going along the highway. And this is in the area where people may be going to the next corner to get to the crossing. Okay, the county zoning regulations section on parking requires landscaping. A planter or landscaped area of at least 4 feet wide shall be provided adjacent to all street rights-of-way. Live landscaping shall be provided and maintained within any planter or landscaped area required by this section. Not more than 30% of the landscaped area may be covered with hard surfaces, such as gravel and impervious materials. Such landscaped area or planter shall create the visual and physical separation necessary to reduce the traffic hazards between pedestrians and vehicles. So this relates to the missing landscaped area, which would seem to be a code violation. So then this shifts now 2 blocks north, still on the west side, and this is at the Taqueria, between California and Virginia. And so those are the 2 streets which were discussed for possible crossings. And once again, if there were only one crossing, people would want to walk along here to get to the crossing. And at the moment, what you have here, the restaurant has adequate parking, which can be accessed off of Virginia, but most customers park on gravel in the front. You can enter and exit anywhere along the highway there, and there's no designated space for pedestrians. So this basically, the restaurant looks like it was built before the highway, so I mean, this is not an issue of they changed something particularly, but it would seem useful for the consultants on the crossing design to consider this. If there's a crossing here, there might be some consideration as to improving that block along there for pedestrians. So my suggestion for possible MCC action, well, first thing that comes to mind is to request code compliance action on the unpermitted removal and paving of the highway buffer landscaping at the gas station. And then, like I said, also we could send this along to the consultant as part of MCC comment on the crossing design. So, any questions from the council?
No, but I'm happy to put a motion on the table.
Well, we're gonna have public comment too, but any clarifying questions?
Oh, geez.
Okay, public comment, I have one speaker slip.
Wait.
Leonard.
Are we gonna leave that up?
Well, you can raise your hand at this point. Start with Leonard.
I think your request needs to be a lot stronger. I agree with everything you implied. You didn't really come out and say too much, but all of your implications I agree with in the presentation. And in particular, all of those businesses that have frontage on the side streets need to completely block off the side of their property that's on the highway. There should be no highway access at all to any parcel that has access to a side street. And that's the Caltrans rule, and it's been that rule forever. This is a limited access highway, which has the definitions that you had up on the screen. And this affects the whole concept of safe crossings even more than what you stated, because crossings at uncontrolled intersections where you have turning movements in 8 different directions, or in the case of Moss Beach, in one place it's at least 10 different directions. Pedestrians only have 2 eyes and they're both in the front. When you have 8 different turning movements of cars that you have to watch out for, that's a real problem. And so I think that this came up a couple of years ago when we had the consultants here. I don't remember for sure, that in a lot of cases, the safer place to put pedestrian crossings in zones like Moss Beach is actually between the streets, not at the intersections. Because then you only have to look out for 2 directions and no turning movements. But all the left turn all the left turn combinations is just really a lot for a pedestrian to have to watch out for. So it's really good that you put these 2 agenda items on the same meeting agenda, because they do line up pretty well. And I think that if you do what I said and get the frontage access enforced, so there's no highway access to the businesses that have alternate accesses on side streets, then you've greatly improved the potential for pedestrian safe crossings.
Bill?
Members of the council, I fully support what you're asking for here, Lisa, and if you could just go to the slide of the Taqueria. I'd like to point out some other things. Next slide, I guess it is. Yeah, that one. I recall about maybe a year and a half ago, I met with you and the Vesprimis, and I believe Chris Hunter was there, and we took a look at that. It's actually gotten much worse now. The drop off from the highway into the dirt lot there used to be about 3 or 4 inches of space. They backfilled it. And what it's turned out is they've now taken that lot next door to it, and they basically turned it into a de facto dirt street so they can run in, get that, and then jump out onto California and go whichever way they want. So that whole corner over the past 2 to 3 years has kind of deteriorated into, I don't know, what would you call it, a free-for-all, a dirt lot. It's certainly, you know, when you talk about trying to put in a nice street over on Carlos and the bike lanes and what I like to call the beautification of downtown Moss Beach, you got this, you know, just abysmal. I've seen tractor trailers pull in there going north, get their tacos, then pull out again off of the dirt onto Highway 1 and continue going north. That can't be legal. And it's right across from the substation, but, you know, I mean, if the officers are in there doing paperwork, they're not looking out the window. So if there doesn't happen to be a sheriff's car right there at the time, they get away with it. They should not be, like Glenda said, they shouldn't be accessing the street when they actually have, you know, a side street there that they can go off of. And I also agree with the crossings in the middle of the block, especially if you got a raised median in there. You really cut out a lot of the issues with having to watch all the traffic that's going on. But I fully support what they're doing here. People have been, you know, even the West Premiums back you up on this one.
I'd just like to point out that the continual gravel work to protect the shoulder of the road is done by Caltrans. So, I mean, because all the people driving on and off the highway there, the gravel pulls away from the asphalt, and then Caltrans has to come in and keep fixing it. It's not the restaurant people that do that, it's Caltrans that keep that maintained. Was anyone else, Sabrina?
Yeah, hi. I did put in a public speaker slip about this because I live in Moss Beach, and on the west side of Highway 1, at this section, this is a great slide, and also in front of the gas station, kind of feels like we're living in a developing nation. And the problem with that is that in a developing nation, we would have we might have a side of the road looking like this, but we would also have probably a dirt road, and vehicles would be driving a lot slower because there'd be potholes and what have you. And we've got this highway where people are driving high speed, you know, higher speed than some of the other towns because of our speed limit being so unfortunately high through Moss Beach. And then we've got this, and I mean, it looks like hell. And I don't know how this happened or why this hasn't been dealt with, but these business owners could do something to improve their property, and they should. They are running successful businesses. There's no reason that the community needs to be subjected to this kind of blight, not to mention the fact that it's dangerous. It adds to the pedestrian bicycle chaos when crossing Highway 1. So I strongly support the MCC writing a letter about this, and I hope something could be done to work with the business owners to try to improve the property so that it's safer for pedestrians, more attractive, meeting whatever codes are in place and whatnot. So thanks for bringing this up.
Rick?
Rick Lohman, Miramar. I was the gentleman who gave away my speaker slip on the first agenda item. Speed that along. I live in Miramar, but I'm an infrequent visitor to both these establishments. I've come in here at night, like coming back from work, and I've literally had no idea where I'm going when I pull off the road. I've had fear of, am I driving across someone's yard? Am I pulling out? Am I going to drop 6 feet off a curb? You can't see anything. I said, finally, I'm ready, and I pulled out and realized there was actually a road going the other way, and there was a vehicle coming at me, and I had to swerve off the road because there's no indication anywhere where you are in that whole section. If you could improve that, to me, besides the obvious beauty aspect of the areas, it's serious dangerous for people who don't live there all the time and know exactly, oh, this dirt mound means that's a curve, I have to drive around it. You know, us southern folks, you know, just, we just don't see all those things, and if you could clean that up, I think it's gonna be safer, and like you said, you have traffic coming from just all over the place, people are just driving all over the place there.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close the public comment. I have a question for you, I think. Do you have any suggestions on how we best effect some
Well, with the taqueria,
change?
I think I would try and work with the business owner. I mean, I think it would make their place more attractive. But on the gas station, we'll investigate that.
Should I send that to the code compliance person?
Yeah, I hate to say it to Nicholas. Send it to Nicholas and we'll get it to the code
Well,
compliance.
I'm in touch with her all the time.
Why not? Send it to the code, send it to her. Santiago?
Anna
Yeah.
Santiago.
Yeah, send it to him.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Council members, have any discussion on this?
Yeah,
Other than
I have
Rusty's
some discussion. I'd like to turn the slide back on, please.
Can we go to the last one? Oh, he's
Now we have to go all the way back to go and say may I, or what, how is it?
No, it'll come.
Well, go ahead with your
So,
question.
I want to say that, you know, I've been a regular customer of the taqueria for a number of years, and I think that oftentimes the whole concept of grandfathering comes into play. I don't know if it's the right word here. Can you bring up the taqueria again, please? And, you know, clearly, you know, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, that this planter, I don't want it was removed.
No, there wasn't a
from the gas-
planter there, it was at the gas station.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, something that was changed 2 years ago is, I would not consider grandfathered. That should be something that looked into seriously. The taqueria, on the other hand, I've gone to that place ever since it was a burger place before a taqueria. It does provide a, is it possible to load up?
Oh, what happened? Well, you turned the machine off, messed everything
Okay,
up.
all right, I'll get my message across. So one thing, you know, okay, yes, third world country look, you know, it's, smaller. You know, I know that the taqueria, serves the community, a lot of people use it, it's, you know, inexpensive, quality whole foods.
Dan,
Well,
before,
I want to make one big point, that around all this is nobody ever mentioned this road here. One thing that our highway is lacking is a safe and easy place to make a U-turn. When traffic is really bad, and I'm at the market and I want to make a left turn here, and I cannot, I easily make a right turn, go up here, make a left turn, and then come around, and then I'm back.
thanks for the tip, Dan. I'm gonna do that from now on.
Steve, you weren't recording that, were you?
That's a safe and easy way to do. I understand that, you know, there may be some landscaping, you know, needed here, but it's been that way
All right,
for 25 years.
can I,
Yeah, but that's not true. That is not true. That's little road there has only been over the past 3 to 4 years. I worked at.
No, I'm at the
all right,
establishment.
can I
Go to the last
establish,
slide.
can I establish the point, reiterate the point I wanted to make about this restaurant? First of all, let me say, I'm a real fan, I go there all the time, and I park on the gravel in front, and I enter and exit off the highway freely. And so, you know, and I didn't bring this up, but I'm just saying, I think the whole place is of a piece in the ambiance, and I don't have a complaint particularly. I only brought this up because we're talking about crossings, and people are gonna wanna walk between California and Virginia, and perhaps some treatment in this design could delineate where that might be best for people to walk. And as far as the gas station goes, I think that that is a code compliant issue, and that the county has good regulations for, this protects the pedestrians and it also beautifies the property, and it provides some pervious surface at the gas station. So, yeah, I didn't mean to come in here and say the taco place is horrible and they need to revamp their whole program. No, I didn't mean to say that at all. I'm just saying we're going to have a crossing here at Virginia or California. Maybe we need to consider where people should walk when they go in front of this restaurant. And when we're having conversations, when Caltrans comes here and they say we have these strict rules, you can't put a median and you got to have the speed limit this, and we're saying, and we can say, well, hey, but look at this rule. You didn't mind breaking this rule and giving the gas station 3 entrances. So I mean, maybe that's all I was saying. I don't think we're asking the gas station at this point to block off their entrances. I mean, other than the landscape island. And I think with a big truck, they do need access. So I wasn't going that far. So anybody else?
Should we go to the left side? I'm happy to put a motion on the table unless other people have more discussion.
Go for it.
All right, I move that we request code compliance action on the unpermitted removal and paving of highway buffer landscaping at Moss Beach gas station. And that would be with county code compliance, correct? Ana
Yes.
Santiago? Yes. I think it only makes sense to submit this. Can I just make this all one motion?
Sure.
Okay, to submit the presentation as part of our comments on Highway 1. It fits in perfectly.
I'll second
Right
it.
before you do that, I have a conflict, so I have to recuse myself from voting.
Okay. I'll second it. Any discussion on the motion?
Just one second. All right, I just need a second to
Did
this
you
process.
take out that landscaping bed?
I don't think I was looking at
Okay.
You don't like plants, do you?
There weren't any plans.
Chris?
Okay, so the motion is to take these two different
Actions, yeah. We ready to vote? All in favor?
I'd like to strike the second. I mean, clearly the first one, but, I don't know how, I mean, in spirit, yes, but I think that adding this to the highway crossing design might be I don't know if that would be helpful, just, it might be distracting. I'm not sure. So I would be very much in favor of the first sentence.
You might want to then split it into 2 motions.
Let's split it into 2 motions.
Maybe I don't want to.
Well, then you have to duke it out with him. Let's just simplify it. Shall we just vote on the first item?
So, before we split it and make new motions, so we're not telling them or even asking them to change their design. We're asking them to consider this as part of their plan. It's just another comment.
We're just pointing it out. Take a look.
Yeah, it relates to the,
If somebody
yes.
makes a motion to split them, and there's a second, then that motion is voted on first.
Yeah. So at the moment, we got all the way through motion, second, and vote before Dan spoke up and objected, so. I think
So I'd
we
like to
have
make
actually start all over again.
Make a motion to split it.
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, that motion has to be voted on first.
What do we have to vote on?
You have to vote, on his motion has to be voted on first.
To split it?
Well, to split it, yes.
Oh, whether or not to split it.
Yeah.
That's your motion to, I'm sorry, I'm not.
You got it
But
right.
are you
Don.
making?
You got it right, Don.
Okay.
If we want to split it into 2 motions, Dan made it, I seconded it, we voted whether we split it or not.
All in favor of splitting the motion in 2 pieces?
Aye.
Aye.
3 to 3, doesn't
No,
pass.
3 to 2.
Oh,
He's
3 to
recused.
2.
Yeah.
All right, so that passes. So we are going to split it into two motions. The first motion would be request county code compliance action on unpermitted removal and paving of highway buffer landscaping at Moss Beach gas station. Second?
You have a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5 to, and 1 abstained. 5 yes, 1 abstained. The second motion then is, shall we submit this presentation as part of MCC comment on highway crossing design? You made the motion, I'll second it. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand. So we have 4 yes, opposed, 1 opposed, and 1 abstained. Okay. Thank you very much
Okay, thank you.
for your help. Next item on the agenda is council activity. Correspondence received and meetings attended.
Okay, guys,
We need a 3-minute recess.
We're still having our meeting.
Yes.
The camera's running. Nicholas, could you move to the side?
You're gonna all get detention.
Council activity? Anybody have anything to report?
Yeah, I'm bummed that everybody's leaving
Press it one more
because
time. Yeah, press
on
it.
June 12th, we had the CDRC meeting for the Mavericks apartment complex in El Granada.
Talk to the TV.
Yeah, it's too bad everybody left. There was about 15 members of the public there, and in fact, the regular El Granada person wasn't there, so I chaired the committee, and we voted 2-1 to recommend for approval. And even though
What was the vote? Who-
I voted to approve, one of the architects, Willard Williams, voted to approve, one of the architects, Diane Whitaker, voted against. The reasons that I voted to approve, and I believe that Willard did as well, is the developer did make several concessions. This isn't a total list, but from 15 units down to 12, no rooftop deck, no elevator, smaller structural footprint, reduce the overall height by 9 feet, and owner representative Tim Henderson has been at several community meetings in the couple of months since that public meeting. I've seen him taking notes on hearing what the public is interested in. So I think that a couple of takeaways. One is that while it was totally clear that the community does not want this, okay, it doesn't want this, and we heard that at the public meeting, the pre-meeting. That came clear in this too, but by the end of the meeting, because we had really gone through this issue in depth, and it was repeated over and over what the parameters of cosign design review are, that there was a sense at the end of the meeting of resigned acceptance. That there wasn't a lot of people still angry and upset and arguing, and when the vote came, in fact, there was no comment because, and I said when I voted it's with a heavy heart that I vote to recommend for approval because I personally don't think I have other things that are not relevant to community cosign design review that I didn't say. But there's nothing, there's nothing in the community design manual, which is actually the document we use, not the regular cosign design review guideline. There was nothing in there to prevent us from voting for approval. And so it was fair that we voted for approval. So it personally pained me, but that's fair, and we were following the guidelines, and the guidelines did not prohibit it. Now, there were several conditions for approval. We can approve a project, and if it's missing some things, and ask that those be conditions for approval when it goes to planning. So there were several things, but they were minor things, nothing structural, nothing architectural, such as cut sheets for lighting. We wanted to see a better landscaping list that had plants and trees from the recommended county list. They have a couple of signs that are going to go on the building, and we asked for dimensions, location, color, content, and lighting for those signs. But again, these are kind of minor conditions that we have on most projects, and nothing to hold them up. Another important thing was that this is really the first cosign design review committee review of a multi-unit project.
And I think that's something that is pertinent because the consensus is there's gonna be more of these projects coming. And there was nothing to stop this project from recommending for approval, so.
So that, I didn't realize that, I think, because I know there's other, right here in El Granado, there's other duplexes and whatnot. So Coastside Design Review has not reviewed any other of the apartment buildings, or?
No.
Because I know I've seen the MCC used to, 10 years ago would get involved, but I guess that was just from an aspect of the project as a whole.
Yeah, that's what comment that county staff made, was that this was.
So those opportunities are still there. If you
For-
felt you wanted if you wanted to have a work group and draft some comments for the MCC to, was it going to come to the planning commission?
For this project right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the resigned acceptance of the people that were there, well, okay, it has passed another hoop, another hurdle, but there are many more to go. And somebody could still appeal it to the coastal commission, and, this is just one of many steps, and it's gonna go to planning, and then probably maybe go to board of supervisors, and coastal commission may hear an appeal on it. So, this is an interesting project in that it is kind of I wouldn't say a test case in that it's a real project, but it's gonna lay some groundwork, yeah, for what's probably coming in the future. We had several submitted comments, not people that were there, from owners of other multi-unit complexes and real estate people supporting this project. And so you can kind of see where, that they're very interested in this, if this project goes through and it's accepted, and what's the blueprint for getting a project like this accepted. This is an important project for the precedents that it's setting.
But it's zoned for that, correct?
It's properly zoned, and that was not to have this meeting go as well as it did, and I really appreciate the decorum of the people there. It had to clearly be stated over and over, like, we are not addressing traffic flow, we are not addressing parking, we are not addressing zoning. These are not issues for coastline design review. And so therefore, at the end, there just really was nothing that left to object to. So that's going through. If I could just quickly mention two more things. On Saturday is the Devil's Slide Ride, and I am going to be participating in that and doing the brutal 103-miler, so hopefully I will see you at the next meeting. No, but I have one light I'm thinking about putting 2 lights on and a rear view mirror. God, but you know what? I might bring a flag just as a joke. Like, I'll be on the starting line in my Lycra, my light bike, and have the flag, and probably get pelted with some energy bars and stuff. The other thing is, I know that this is maybe seen as a Half Moon Bay issue, but tomorrow night at the IDES Hall in Half Moon Bay, there's a community meeting about the incident that happened in Moon Ridge. And again, that is, yes, that is something that Half Moon Bay is dealing with, but it's also county sheriff. And the Hispanic Latino community is an important part of the entire coast side. This is something that is very important to that community, and I think there are larger issues that go beyond just the Latino community. So if anybody wants to attend, that's tomorrow at the IDES Hall in Half Moon Bay from 6 to 8 p.m. Thank you.
Anybody else? Dave?
A couple things. Half Moon Bay Library plan has finished all of its preliminary working meetings and public comment meetings. They will present those results at the special meeting of the Half Moon Bay City Council July 15th at the Operations Center at 537 Kelly at 5 p.m. The documents are on the county library site. If people want to look at them, I've sent Chris the link so he can put them in the minutes. I recommend people look at them. As these things go, I think it's going to be a pretty reasonable project. City Council is looking at funding as well. The other public meeting I attended was the Granada Sanitary District meeting, first meeting after the election for Measure G. Measure G was one of the items discussed, and given that covers about half the population of the Midcoast, or a little bit more, I assume the whole community is interested that there will be public meetings and various other kinds of outreach, trying to determine what to do and how much money to spend and when to spend it. There can't be anything official until October 1st in terms of decisions, but a lot of planning can occur before that. So if you're interested, watch the Granada Sanitary District website.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, future agendas. I have a question for you. So you heard my announcement about the neg deck for the airport land use compatibility plan. Does anybody think we need to have that on our agenda to discuss that at all? I'm not particularly recommending it. Like I say, I was the MCC delegate on the project advisory team and have followed it. And this particular, you know, not the neg deck, but the document itself, the ALUCP, is pretty much, you can't really change it because, you know, they put in X, Y, and Z, and then you get what you get. It's the law, so.
I have no interest in having it on an agenda.
Well, there you are then. So,
Are you saying there's no significant changes in the land use plan update itself?
no, I did not say that at all.
You can read it, and then you can put it on the agenda if you'd like.
Because if there's significant changes, then the neg deck might not be appropriate.
The neg deck is, no, there's not significant changes. It depends what property you own. Interesting enough, and I'll mention this, the new safety zones, there's many more zones and they cover much more area than they did before. And one in particular, if any of you who remember Moss Beach Highlands, this roughly 12-acre property up there near the hospital, and which never got built, but it's now within this turning zone, or not the whole parcel, but a little more than half. The lower part, where they were going to have the high-density housing, is now in this safety zone, and you can only have housing there if it's 2 units per acre or something like that. It's like totally not high density anymore. And it mentions in there that if they were to use that, they'd have to put it all in the other part of the parcel, but that's the part up on the ridgeline. So that parcel looked like it would be quite impacted. And it's not clear to me, I shouldn't be doing this whole thing now under future agendas.
No, you should not.
I'm sorry.
It's,
I saw Rick
hours
sitting
late.
there and I thought he'd be interested in that. But anyhow, so unless I hear anything, I won't put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I would say if the summary comes out and the summary has surprises in it, then it would be worth putting it on the agenda. Otherwise, I think your proposal just put it on the website is the right thing.
Okay. So I don't have a definite date on the Big Wave EIR. They are going to be a design review on July 10th. Is that the date? And Camille had said that the EIR would be available mid-July or something. So that, you know, I don't know, we will probably we'll want to comment on that. But there'll be a month-long period. There won't be one of these rush items. And then Plan Princeton, the alternatives, they plan to come to the MCC in early August. So there's that to look forward to. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Are we ready to adjourn? Motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. 9:30 something.